The rising sun bathed the Riverton horizon, painting the sky with orange hues over Lake Willow. In the imposing house in Windmill Heights, Julia, just 9 years old, was already awake, sweeping the kitchen floor, while the other neighborhood children still slept. Her small fingers gripped the broom with the force of someone who feared the consequences of a job poorly done. "Don't forget the corners, girl. Didn't your mother ever teach you how to clean properly?" Denise, her stepmother's voice, cut through the silence like a razor. Tall, elegant, and always impeccably dressed, she watched her stepdaughter's every move with eagle eyes. "Your father calls tonight, and I want everything perfect." "Understood." Julia nodded without looking up. Her father, Richard, a respected engineer in the oil industry, spent months offshore on platforms in the North Sea basin. When he married Denise, 3 years after his first wife's untimely passing, he believed he had found the ideal person to care for his daughter during his long absences. "Yes, Aunt Denise," she replied automatically, though she knew the word aunt was merely a facade for visitors. At home, any term of kinship was forbidden. The reality, hidden behind the high walls and perfectly manicured garden, was quite different from the smiling photos Denise regularly sent to Richard. In the digital images, Julia always appeared well-dressed, smiling in front of birthday cakes or on outings that never happened. "After you finish here, go clean your room. And I don't want a single speck of dust under the bed, understood?" Denise adjusted the gold watch on her wrist, a gift from Richard. "I have a residents' association meeting and then lunch with the ladies from the club. I'll be back at 5. Your lunch is in the fridge." Lunch, Julia knew, would be the usual, a simple pot of rice and a boiled egg. Meanwhile, on social media, Denise would post elaborate photos of dishes at the French restaurant she frequented with her friends, all wives of successful businessmen and executives. The old storage room adapted, as Julia's bedroom was in the back of the house, near the laundry area. The small window barely let in daylight, but it was her only refuge. There, hidden between the mattress and the wall, she kept a notebook where she drew and wrote messages to her father, letters she could never send. Mrs. Cleo, the only maid who remained after Denise's arrival, was the only breath of humanity in that house. At 63, with time-marked brown skin and calloused hands, the old lady observed everything discreetly. She came from Willow Creek, a town in the metropolitan area, and had worked for the family since before Julia's mother passed away. "Girl, have you eaten yet?" she whispered, entering the laundry room where Julia was organizing cleaning supplies. "Not yet, Mrs. Cleo. I have to finish here first." The old lady pulled a small cheese roll from her apron pocket. "Eat this quickly. No one will know." Those small gestures kept Julia going. At the private school she attended, teachers had already noticed her withdrawn behavior. But Denise, an active member of the Parent-Teacher Association, always had convincing explanations. "Julia is still processing her mother's loss, you know how it is. At home we have family therapy, and she has all the support." The truth was that the girl was becoming increasingly isolated. Denise controlled her friendships, her schedule, and even what she could say on the phone when her father called, always on speakerphone, always in her stepmother's presence. "Are you enjoying ballet classes, sweetheart?" Richard would ask that night, as he did every bi-weekly call, and Julia would answer yes, although she had never been to any class. The money Richard sent for extracurricular activities had other destinations, known only to Denise and her bank statement. After cleaning her room, Julia sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the only photo she had of her biological mother, hidden inside a storybook. Gabrielle, a literature teacher who met Richard at a book fair in downtown Riverton, smiled with the same almond-shaped eyes Julia had inherited. "Girl, are you there?" Mrs. Cleo's low voice interrupted her thoughts. "Denise has left. You can come eat a little more. I made a carrot cake last night and brought you a piece." In the immaculate kitchen, Julia sat timidly on the stool, while Mrs. Cleo served a generous slice of cake and a glass of milk. "You can't tell anyone, but I saw some strange things, girl," Mrs. Cleo said, looking around as if the walls could hear. "Denise was in the office yesterday late at night, going through your father's papers. She took photos of some documents and spoke on the phone in English." Julia chewed slowly, savoring every crumb. "She always does that, Mrs. Cleo. Dad left her in charge of his affairs. It's not just that, the old lady insisted, lowering her voice even further. I heard her talking about passports, about transfers. It sounded like she was planning a trip. Without you and without your father. Julia's heart raced. The idea of Denise leaving should be a relief, but what would happen to her? Would she be sent to a boarding school, as Denise had threatened so many times? And there's more, Mrs. Cleo continued, sitting beside the girl. Your father called home yesterday after you had gone to sleep. I heard Denise saying there would be a surprise. What kind of surprise? Julia's eyes widened. I'm not sure, but she said something about him arriving earlier than expected. I think your father is coming back, girl. That news lit a small flame of hope in Julia's heart. Perhaps if her father returned soon, he could see how things really were. Perhaps she could finally show him the letters she wrote, tell him about the nights she went hungry, about the punishments in the dark room. When, Mrs. Cleo? When is he coming? From what I understood, within a week. But don't tell anyone I told you, for goodness sake. Denise will fire me, and then who will take care of you? The sound of the electronic gate interrupted the conversation. Mrs. Cleo jumped up, quickly hiding the evidence of the impromptu snack. Julia ran to her room, her heart pounding against her chest. That night, while Denise managed the call with Richard in the office, Julia allowed herself to dream. Lying on the narrow bed, she imagined what it would be like when her father discovered the truth. In her hidden notebook, she wrote with the shaky hand of a child who still believed in better days. Daddy, I'm waiting for you to come back. I have so many things to tell you. On the other side of the city, at Riverton International Airport, Richard Mendez boarded a flight to Miami, where he would catch a helicopter to the platform. In his briefcase, he carried a small package, a necklace with a butterfly pendant he had bought for his daughter. In his pocket, the return ticket home scheduled for 3 months later. Or so he thought. What Richard didn't know was that, as he departed, Denise was already putting into motion a plan carefully elaborated over years. A plan that would forever change the fate of that seemingly perfect family. In the following weeks, the routine at the Mendez household became even more rigid. Denise, visibly nervous about Richard's possible early return, intensified her control over Julia and everything that happened in the residence. As of today, you will no longer go to school, she announced one Thursday morning, as she carefully applied her imported clay face mask. We'll say you have health problems. I've already spoken with the principal. Julia, who was setting the breakfast table, almost dropped the porcelain cup. But, Aunt, I have a test next week. And the science project presentation. The slap hit her face before she could even finish the sentence. The mark of 5 fingers was imprinted on the girl's fair skin. Never question my decisions, Denise hissed, gripping Julia's chin tightly. And if your father calls, you have mononucleosis, understood? A disease that causes a lot of fatigue. It's contagious, that's why you can't go to school. That same day, Denise summoned Mrs. Cleo for a conversation in the office. The maid left there pale with teary eyes. What happened, Mrs. Cleo? Julia asked when she found her alone in the laundry area. The old lady looked around, making sure they were alone. She fired me, girl. Said she no longer needed my services because you'll be home now and can help with chores. Julia felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Mrs. Cleo was her only support, her only connection to the world beyond the walls of that house. You can't leave, she whispered, grabbing the old lady's apron. Please don't leave me alone with her. Mrs. Cleo hugged the girl, letting a few tears escape. I have no choice, my little one. I need this job to help pay for my Gerald's treatment. But I'll find a way to stay close, I promise. That night, when the house was already silent, Mrs. Cleo tapped lightly on Julia's bedroom window. The girl opened the blind, surprised to see the old lady outside in the dark. Take this, Mrs. Cleo said, passing an old cell phone through the window crack. It's simple, but it works. I put my number in it. If you need anything, call me. I hid enough credit in it for a few months. But how will I charge it? Julia asked, holding the device as if it were a treasure. There's a charger with it. You can use the outlet in the laundry area when she's not looking. Hide it well, girl. Before leaving, Mrs. Cleo also handed her a small hardcover notebook. Write down everything that happens here, everything. One day it might be important. The next day, Denise announced she was hiring a new maid, someone younger and more efficient. Marlene arrived 2 days later, a woman of about 35, a few words and a severe expression, who looked more like a prison guard than a domestic worker. "Marlene will help me take care of you while you're sick," Denise explained with her artificial smile. "And she will also report directly to me any inappropriate behavior." Julia's isolation became complete. No school, no friends, no Mrs. Cleo. Her days were filled with household chores, always under Marlene's watchful eye or Denise's outbursts. During one of Richard's rare calls, Julia almost let the truth slip. "Daddy, when are you coming back?" she asked with a choked voice, while Denise watched her with predator's eyes. "Soon, Princess. 2 more months, but I'm seeing if I can get some time off earlier. Is everything okay there? How is your mononucleosis recovery?" Julia hesitated, looking at Denise, who was making threatening gestures. "I'm getting better, just tired. Is Denise taking good care of you?" Before she could answer, Denise took the phone. "Of course I am, darling. Homemade soup every day, vitamins, medicine on time. Our little one is being very brave." At night, alone in her room, Julia cried silently as she wrote in the notebook Mrs. Cleo had given her. She recorded every lie, every moment of humiliation, every denied meal. At the end of each entry, she drew a small butterfly, a symbol of the freedom she dreamed of achieving. A week later, when Marlene left to do groceries and Denise was at the beauty salon, Julia used the hidden cell phone to call Mrs. Cleo. "Mrs. Cleo, I can't take it anymore," she whispered. "Hidden in the bathroom closet. She won't let me go out. She won't let me eat properly. Marlene watches me all the time." "My God, girl," Mrs. Cleo's voice trembled. "I tried to call your father, but the number I have won't connect. He's on the platform. He only talks through special calls or email. And she controls everything. We need proof, Julia. Are you still writing in the notebook I gave you?" "Yes, every day." "Good. I heard she's been going out a lot with the man. Is that true?" Julia confirmed. "An older man who picks her up in an imported car. She says he's the family accountant, but they hold hands when they think I'm not looking." Mrs. Cleo was silent for a moment. "Listen carefully, girl. I'll try to find out more about this man. Meanwhile, keep recording everything. And if you can, try to find documents in her office, anything that seems important. I'm scared, Mrs. Cleo. I know, my angel. But we need to act before it's too late." That same night, Julia had an idea. She waited for everyone to fall asleep and with silent steps went to Denise's office on the ground floor. The door was locked, as always, but the girl knew the key was hidden inside a decorative vase in the hallway. She had observed Denise using it several times. With trembling hands, she unlocked the door and entered the office. The moonlight entering through the window was enough for her to move without turning on the lights. She went straight to the elegant dark wood desk, where Denise spent hours every night. The drawers were also locked, but one of them didn't close completely due to a paper preventing a perfect fit. Julia managed to open it with some effort. Inside, she found several folders identified with meticulous labels. One of them, marked offshore, caught her attention. It contained bank statements, powers of attorney, and what appeared to be international transfer forms. Julia didn't fully understand those documents, but she knew they were important. Using the hidden cell phone, she photographed page by page. "What do you think you're doing?" The light suddenly turned on. Marlene stood in the doorway, wearing a dark bathrobe and a furious expression. I was just looking for a book to read," Julia stammered, quickly hiding the cell phone in her pajama pocket. "In the locked office? In the middle of the night?" Marlene advanced, grabbing the girl's arm tightly. "Denise will know about this right now." "No, please," Julia begged. "She'll punish me." "Please, Marlene." Something in the child's desperate gaze seemed to touch a point of humanity in the woman. Marlene hesitated, observing the thin, pale girl in front of her. "Go back to your room now," she finally said in a lower voice. "And don't come out until dawn. I won't tell this time, but if I catch you here again..." Julia ran back to her refuge, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would explode. Under the mattress, she hid the cell phone with the precious photographs. She needed to find a way to send those images to Mrs. Cleo, but the internet signal in the house was password protected. On the other side of the city, Mrs. Cleo couldn't sleep. Sitting at the kitchen table of her modest apartment, she reread the notes she had made about Julia's situation. Her husband, Gerald, approached with difficulty, leaning on a cane. "Still worried about the girl?" "That woman is planning something, Gerald. and I'm sure it's nothing good. Tomorrow I'm going to the company where her father works. Even if I can't talk to him, someone there must know how to contact him urgently. Be careful. Cleo, this Denise seems dangerous. Mrs. Cleo nodded, as she carefully folded an envelope where she had kept a letter, her own version of the events at the Mendez household, written with the simplicity and sincerity of someone who had witnessed a child's silent suffering. In the Windmill Heights mansion, Julia finally fell asleep, exhausted by fear and adrenaline. In her dreams, she saw her father returning home, discovering the truth, freeing her from that nightmare. What she didn't know was that thousands of miles away, on Global Petroleum Corp's North Sea Platform 51, Richard Mendez had just received news that would change his plans and the fate of that entire family. On North Sea Platform 51, 150 kilometers off the coast of Miami, Richard Mendez was in his small office when he received the call that would change everything. "Engineer Mendez," said the voice of the operations coordinator. "We've just received word from the board. The transition project will be brought forward. We need you to return to the mainland tomorrow to lead the onshore team." Richard frowned, surprised. "That quickly? I thought we'd have at least another month of preparation." "Top-down decision, Mendez. It seems the Chinese have moved up their technical visit. You're the only one who knows the entire project." That news, which at other times would have been met with apprehension due to the sudden change, filled Richard's heart with relief. He could go home, see his daughter, take care of her during her recovery from the illness Denise had mentioned in recent calls. "All right. I'll be ready for tomorrow's helicopter." As he packed his belongings, he picked up his cell phone to call home and deliver the good news. He hesitated, phone in hand. What if he made it a surprise? Julia would love to see him arrive unannounced. He imagined his daughter's face lighting up, as it always did when he returned from long sea journeys. In Riverton, the morning began tensely at the Mendez household. Marlene watched Julia suspiciously as the girl cleaned the living room windows, but had not mentioned the night incident to Denise. For reasons she didn't fully understand herself, something in the child's vulnerability prevented her from worsening her situation even further. "Finish that quickly. Denise will be down for coffee soon," she ordered, maintaining her usual harsh tone. Julia nodded, rubbing harder at the already spotless glass. Since the night before, she hadn't had a chance to look at the photos she had taken or contact Mrs. Cleo. The cell phone remained hidden under the mattress, and she feared the battery was running out. At Global Petroleum Corp's Riverton headquarters, Mrs. Cleo waited in the reception area, wearing her best clothes and the only pair of high heels she owned. She had lied to get there, saying she was Richard Mendez's aunt and needed to deliver urgent family documents. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the receptionist said after a few phone calls. "Engineer Mendez is offshore on Platform 51, and we don't have an exact return date. I can forward a message to the offshore communications department, but we can't guarantee an immediate response." "It's very urgent, young lady," Mrs. Cleo insisted. "It's about his daughter." The receptionist, a young woman no older than 25, hesitated. "Couldn't his wife handle it? We have Ms. Denise's contact for emergencies." "It's about her that I need to talk to him," Mrs. Cleo whispered, leaning over the counter. "The girl isn't well, and it's not due to illness. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Something in the old lady's eyes made the receptionist serious. "Leave a contact number. I'll do my best to ensure this information reaches him directly." Mrs. Cleo wrote her number on a piece of paper, adding a small note. Subject: Julia in danger, urgent. Back at the Mendez house, Denise came downstairs wearing an elegant white linen outfit and discreet jewelry. She carried several folders and seemed to be in a hurry. "I'll be out all day," she announced to Marlene. "Important meetings." Julia stays home, obviously. No visitors, phone calls, or any external contact. Mononucleosis is very contagious. Remember that if anyone asks. "Yes, ma'am," Marlene replied, helping her with the folders. Denise approached Julia, who had finished cleaning the windows and was now waiting for new orders. "And you, behave yourself. No going into my office or touching my things." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am," Julia replied mechanically. When Denise's car disappeared through the automatic gate, Julia felt a slight sense of relief. Days without her stepmother's presence were always less oppressive, even with Marlene's constant vigilance. "Go clean her room," Marlene ordered. "And don't touch the drawers. Just make the bed, vacuum, and clean the bathroom." While cleaning the master bedroom, Julia noticed something different. 2 travel suitcases had been partially removed from the closet. These were the suitcases Denise used for long trips, not for her weekend outings. Inside the closet, some shelves were emptier than usual, as if clothes had been discreetly removed. Taking advantage of Marlene being busy in the laundry room, Julia ran to her room and grabbed the hidden cell phone. The battery indicated only 15%. With trembling fingers, she sent a message to Mrs. Cleo. "Big suitcases in the room. I think she's going to travel. Closet half empty. I have photos of the office documents. How do I send them to you?" The answer came quickly. "Do you know the Wi-Fi password?" "No, they never told me." "Try looking behind the router or underneath it. Sometimes it's written there." Julia put the phone away and returned to work, planning how she would get to the router in the office. Her chance came during lunch, when Marlene received a call and went out to the backyard to answer privately. With silent steps, the girl ran to the office. The router was on a high shelf. She dragged a chair and climbed up, carefully turning the device. On the back, a sticker contained a series of numbers and letters. She quickly photographed it with her cell phone and put everything back in place. Back in her room, she sent the photo to Mrs. Cleo, who replied minutes later, "Got it. Now send the photos of the documents." With trembling hands, Julia sent all the images she had captured the night before. The process was slow and every second seemed an eternity. When the last photo was sent, the battery indicated only 3%. "Received everything. I'll analyze it and show it to someone who understands. Stay strong, girl. Help is on the way." Before she could reply, the cell phone turned off. Julia hid it again and returned to her tasks, her heart racing with hope and fear. The next afternoon, as Julia folded clothes in the laundry room, she heard agitated voices coming from the kitchen. Marlene seemed nervous, talking on the phone. "Yes, ma'am, I understand." "No, she's in her room, resting." "Tomorrow? That early?" "I understand. Yes, I'll arrange everything as you asked." When Marlene hung up, she noticed Julia standing at the laundry room door. "What do you want?" she asked abruptly, putting the phone in her pocket. "I just came to ask if I can put the towels in the hallway closet." Marlene stared at her for a moment, as if evaluating something. Then, surprisingly, her expression softened a little. "Sit here," she said, pulling a chair from the kitchen table. Confused, Julia obeyed. She had never seen that expression on the maid's face. "Listen, girl," Marlene began in a low voice. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but tomorrow you're going to travel with Denise." "Travel? Where to?" Julia's surprise was genuine. "She didn't tell me exactly, just said it's a long trip. Asked me to pack your clothes, documents, everything. You leave very early." A chill ran down Julia's spine. That didn't seem right. Denise never took her on trips, always leaving her with temporary nannies when she needed to be away. "Does my father know about this?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Marlene looked away. "I don't know. I'm just telling you because—" She hesitated, as if weighing her next words. "Because I think you should be prepared." That night, while Denise had not yet returned, Julia desperately tried to recharge the hidden cell phone to contact Mrs. Cleo. She found an old adapter in the laundry room drawer and discreetly connected it to an outlet in the hallway, hidden behind a vase. While waiting for the device to gain enough charge, she wrote a long entry in her diary, detailing everything Marlene had said about the sudden trip. At the end, as always, she drew the small butterfly, a symbol of her hope for liberation. The house phone rang, startling her. It was unusual to receive calls at night. She heard Marlene answer in the living room. "Mendez residence." "Yes, who would like—" "No, she's not home now." "From the airport?" "No, there must be some mistake. She didn't mention anything about—" Julia approached silently, trying to hear more of the conversation. "One moment." Marlene seemed to tense up. "When is he arriving?" "Tomorrow morning." "Yes, I'll pass on the message. Thank you." When she hung up, Marlene stood still for a few moments, as if processing the information. Then, in a sudden decision, she took out her own cell phone and dialed a number. "Denise, sorry to bother you so late. I just received a call from the airport, confirming transport for tomorrow at 5 a.m. No, I didn't say anything about a trip. But there's something else. They called from Global Petroleum Corp. Mr. Richard is returning tomorrow. Arrives at Riverton International Airport at 8:30 a.m. From her hiding place in the hallway, Julia felt her heart race. Her father was coming back tomorrow. Hope was rekindled with full force. But what did that trip Denise was planning mean? Why the rush to leave just when Richard was returning? At Mrs. Cleo's house, the phone also rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Cleo? This is from Global Petroleum Corp. We received your message for Engineer Mendez. He asked us to inform you that he will be disembarking in Riverton tomorrow morning. He also asked us to say he will call as soon as he lands. Mrs. Cleo took a deep breath, feeling tears of relief well up in her eyes. Thank goodness. Please tell him it's very urgent. It's about his daughter. At Miami Executive Airport in Miami, Richard Mendez awaited his connecting flight to Riverton, sitting in the airline's VIP lounge. In his briefcase, in addition to the project documents, he carried the gift for his daughter and a growing concern. Something in his last conversation with Denise had intrigued him. Small inconsistencies, broken phrases, her insistence on saying Julia was fine, but always avoiding them talking alone. Years of engineering had taught him to be suspicious of irregular patterns, and there was something definitely irregular about his wife's behavior in recent months. Flight 3217 to Riverton. Final call for boarding at Gate 7. Richard stood up, adjusting his jacket and picking up his briefcase. Tomorrow he would be home. Tomorrow he would see his daughter. And tomorrow, finally, he would discover what was truly happening in his absence. The early morning in Riverton still held the last traces of night when Denise's alarm clock rang at 4:15 a.m. She was already awake, mentally reviewing every detail of her plan. The packed suitcases awaited in the closet, 3 large designer bags containing only the essentials, brand-name clothes, jewelry, and documents. The rest could be bought later. In the room next to hers, a smaller suitcase was also prepared, supposedly with Julia's belongings. Denise had instructed Marlene to pack it the night before, including only a few basic changes of clothes and no personal items that could arouse suspicion from immigration authorities. At 4:30 a.m., Denise silently entered Julia's room. The girl was sleeping deeply, exhausted after days of intense work and constant emotional tension. "Wake up," Denise ordered, shaking her harder than necessary. "We have to leave in 20 minutes." Julia slowly opened her eyes, confused by the darkness of the room and the unusual hour. "Where are we going?" she asked, sitting up in bed. "To a place where you'll learn real discipline," Denise replied, tossing some clothes onto the bed. "Dress quickly. The driver is already on his way." As Julia dressed, she tried to understand what was happening. Her father would arrive in a few hours. If she could somehow delay their departure, perhaps she would have a chance to see him. "I need to go to the bathroom," she said, buying time. "Be quick. We have a schedule to keep." In the bathroom, Julia desperately searched for her hidden cell phone. She had left it charging overnight, in a place she believed to be safe, but the device had disappeared. Someone, probably Marlene, following Denise's orders, had found it. With her heart pounding, she returned to the room. She couldn't leave the house without some form of contact or without leaving clues about her destination. In a quick decision, she grabbed the notebook hidden under the mattress and tore out a page. With the pen she always kept nearby, she quickly wrote, "Daddy, she's taking me away. Help." She folded the paper several times and hid it inside a crack in the wooden baseboard of the room, praying someone would find it. At 4:50 a.m., a black luxury car parked silently at the house's entrance. The driver, a man in a suit Julia had never seen before, loaded the suitcases while Denise gave final instructions to Marlene. "When Richard arrives, just tell him I had a family emergency and needed to travel with Julia. Don't mention the destination or expected return." "Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," Marlene replied, avoiding looking at Julia. The car departed into the pre-dawn darkness, taking Denise and Julia to a destination the girl did not know. Through the tinted window, she watched the empty streets of Riverton, trying to memorize the route, looking for any reference that could help her later. "Where are we really going?" she finally asked once they were on the highway. Denise, who was furiously typing on her cell phone, replied without looking up. "We're going to New York City first. Then we'll continue our journey." "For how long?" As long as necessary, Denise cut her off, ending the conversation. In the front seat, the driver kept his eyes on the road, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the back seat. But Julia noticed that occasionally he glanced in the rearview mirror as if assessing the situation. At 6:15 a.m., they arrived at Riverton International Airport. Instead of heading to the passenger terminal, the driver skirted the main building and drove to a less busy area where small private aircraft were parked. "Do you have everything ready?" the driver asked Denise, speaking for the first time. "Yes, passports, documents, everything as agreed." Julia felt a shiver. This was not a normal trip. Why were they avoiding the main terminal? Why such a rush? And most importantly, why leave just when her father was returning? They were led to a small hangar where a private jet awaited, its turbines already running. A middle-aged man wearing sunglasses, even at that hour of the morning, waited at the foot of the stairs. "Denise, darling," he greeted, kissing her lips familiarly. "Everything is ready." Julia recognized him immediately. It was the same man who frequently visited her house, always introduced by Denise as the family accountant. Now it was clear that the relationship between them went far beyond business. "Roderick, this is Julia," Denise introduced, as if the girl were a stranger. "I hope she doesn't cause problems during the trip." "I'm sure she'll be a good girl," he replied, looking at Julia with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "After all, where we're going, inappropriate behavior has very serious consequences." At that moment, Julia understood the gravity of the situation. It wasn't just a trip, it was an escape. Denise planned to disappear with her, likely taking money diverted from her father's accounts. And by the tone of that man, the destination promised nothing good for her. The pilot appeared at the top of the stairs. "We need to leave now if we want to avoid morning air traffic," he announced. "Let's go." Denise pushed Julia towards the stairs. It was at that moment that everything changed. A federal police car entered the hangar at high speed, followed by a civil police vehicle. The vehicles stopped abruptly, blocking access to the aircraft. 4 agents quickly got out, weapons drawn. "Federal police! Nobody move!" Denise's face turned into a mask of panic. Roderick tried to run to the plane but was immediately apprehended. "Denise Mendez?" one of the agents asked, approaching. "You are being detained on suspicion of embezzlement, tax fraud, and attempted kidnapping of a minor." "This is absurd," Denise protested. "I'm her stepmother. I have every right to travel with her, without the father's authorization and with falsified documents." The agent showed a paper. "We have a search and seizure warrant here, and specific orders to ensure the safety of the minor Julia Mendez." As Denise was led to the police car, one of the agents approached Julia. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "Your father is very worried." "My father?" Julia felt tears well up in her eyes. "He knows?" "Yes, he was informed about what was happening. In fact, he should be arriving at the airport right now." At another terminal, less than a kilometer away, Richard Mendez's flight landed 20 minutes early. As the plane touched down in Riverton, he turned on his cell phone, anxious for news. There were dozens of unread messages and missed calls. The first he saw was from an unknown number. "Mr. Mendez, this is Detective Paul Corden of the Federal Police. We are at Riverton International Airport. Your daughter is safe. Please come directly to the Executive Aviation Terminal." Richard didn't immediately understand what that meant, but the urgent tone and the mention of Julia's safety chilled his blood. As the plane came to a complete stop, he ignored disembarkation protocols and was one of the first to exit, running through the terminal as if his life depended on it. Outside, a police officer awaited him with an official car. "Mr. Mendez, please come with me. Your daughter is waiting for you." During the short ride between terminals, the police officer briefly explained the situation. An anonymous tip had alerted authorities about a possible escape from the country involving his wife, a supposed lover, and large sums of money possibly diverted from his accounts. Even more seriously, they planned to take his minor daughter without authorization using altered documents. "Who made the report?" Richard asked, trying to absorb the avalanche of information. "A lady named Cleo. She brought substantial evidence, including photographs of financial documents, records of suspicious transfers, and a diary kept by your daughter documenting concerning situations in your home." Richard felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Cleo, the former maid he had always considered part of the family, and his daughter, keeping a secret diary of sufferings that he, in his long absences, had never perceived. When the car stopped at the hangar, Richard saw the scene that would change his life forever. Denise being placed in a police car, an unknown man already inside another vehicle, and Julia, his little Julia, sitting on a bench, curled up and frightened, but visibly relieved to see him. "Daddy!" she cried, running towards him. Richard knelt, opening his arms to receive his daughter. When he felt her fragile body against his, he realized how thin she was, how small and vulnerable she seemed. And when he looked into her eyes, he saw something that shattered him inside, the look of someone who had lived in fear for too long. "I'm here now," he whispered, hugging her tightly. "I'm here and I'll never leave you alone again." As father and daughter reunited, Mrs. Cleo watched the scene from a distance, accompanied by an investigator who was taking her formal statement. Her tired eyes welled up as she saw the embrace that represented the end of a long nightmare. In the pocket of her simple coat, she carried Julia's notebook, filled with meticulous records of every humiliation, every deprivation, every lie. A document that, in the right hands, had become the key to a child's liberation. "You saved this girl," the investigator said, observing the emotion on her face. Mrs. Cleo shook her head gently. "No, she saved herself with her own courage. I just gave her the push she needed." As the sun fully rose over the airport, illuminating the Riverton sky with golden hues, a new reality began for that family, shattered by greed and rebuilt by the most basic and fundamental love, a father's love for his daughter, and the solidarity of those who refused to be complicit in another's suffering. In the weeks following the dramatic interception at the airport, the Mendez family's life underwent profound transformations. Richard rented a temporary apartment in the Rosewood neighborhood, more modest than the Windmill Heights mansion, but cozy and bright, the opposite of the oppressive environment where Julia had lived for the past few years. The investigation progressed rapidly. Authorities discovered that Denise, in collusion with Roderick Miller, who turned out to be not an accountant, but a financial consultant specializing in international fund transfers, had embezzled nearly $2 million from Richard's personal and business accounts over 3 years. "How did I not notice any of this?" Richard asked Detective Paul Corden, who was coordinating the investigations. They were in the federal police office, reviewing documents and bank statements. "She was meticulous, Mr. Mendez," the detective explained. "Small monthly transfers, fake consulting contracts, a gradual system that didn't raise suspicions. Furthermore, she had broad powers of attorney signed by you." Richard ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that had become frequent in recent days. "I trusted her completely. I spent years focused on work, believing my daughter was well cared for, that my business was in order." "It's a more common story than you imagine," the detective commented, with the experience of someone who had seen many similar cases. People who spend long periods away from home are prime targets for this type of fraud. Distance facilitates manipulation and makes it difficult to perceive warning signs. While the adults discussed legal and financial aspects, Julia faced her own recovery process. With the help of a psychologist specializing in childhood trauma, she began to process her experiences and rediscover aspects of childhood that had been stolen from her. Mrs. Cleo, now formally rehired as the family's housekeeper, became a fundamental part of this process. It was she who suggested that Julia resume old passions, such as drawing and reading, activities that Denise had forbidden, considering them a waste of time. "Remember how you loved to draw butterflies when you were little?" Mrs. Cleo asked one afternoon as they prepared a chocolate cake together in the kitchen of the new apartment. Julia smiled shyly. "Mommy used to say I had talent. She kept all my drawings in a blue folder." "Your father found that folder in the old house," Mrs. Cleo revealed. "It's in his office. Do you want to see?" Julia's eyes shone with genuine excitement, an expression that was becoming increasingly frequent, although there were still difficult days, nightmares, and moments of withdrawal. In the makeshift office Richard had set up in the apartment's second bedroom, Mrs. Cleo opened a cabinet and retrieved a time-worn blue folder. Inside, dozens of drawings made by a very young Julia, childish sketches of butterflies, flowers, and a happy family composed of 3 stick figures. "Mommy kept everything," Julia whispered, touching the yellowed papers with reverence. "She knew that one day you would want to see this again," Mrs. Cleo replied, gently squeezing the girl's shoulder. As they reviewed the old drawings, the apartment doorbell rang. Richard, who was working on his laptop in the living room, went to answer it. "Dr. Sargent, thank you for coming," he greeted, letting in a tall, grey-haired man. "Julia is in the office with Mrs. Cleo." Dr. Michael Sargent was the forensic psychologist assigned by the court to evaluate Julia and prepare a report to be used in the case against Denise. In addition to the financial charges, she now faced allegations of mistreatment, psychological abuse, and attempted kidnapping of a minor. "How is she reacting?" the psychologist asked as they walked down the hallway. "Every day is different," Richard replied. "There are moments when she seems like a normal child, playing and smiling. At other times she completely withdraws or has panic attacks. Just yesterday I accidentally broke a glass in the kitchen, and she became distraught, begging not to be punished." Dr. Sargent nodded, understanding. "These are expected responses to the trauma she experienced. The important thing is that she is now in a safe environment, with people who truly love her." The session with the psychologist lasted almost 2 hours. When it ended, Julia was emotionally exhausted. But she had taken an important step. She had managed to verbalize for the first time the punishments Denise inflicted on her when she made mistakes with household chores. "She would lock me in the basement closet," she recounted, her voice choked. "Sometimes for hours. It was dark and smelled of mold. I had to be silent or the time would increase." Richard, who accompanied the session as a silent observer, had to hold back tears and the urge to hug his daughter. With each painful revelation, Dr. Sargent had explained that it was important to allow Julia to express everything without interruptions or emotional reactions that might make her withdraw. That night, after Julia finally fell asleep, Richard found Mrs. Cleo in the living room, organizing her things to leave. "Stay a little longer," he asked, indicating the sofa. "I need to talk to you." The old lady sat down, adjusting her shawl over her shoulders. Despite the difficult months, there was a new energy in her eyes, the satisfaction of someone who had fulfilled an important moral duty. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Richard asked directly. It was a question that had tormented him since the day at the airport. Mrs. Cleo sighed deeply. "I tried, Mr. Richard, many times. I called the numbers you left, sent messages through the company, even wrote letters. But Denise intercepted everything. When I insisted too much, she fired me. Even so, you continued to help Julia." "That girl is like a granddaughter to me," she replied simply, as if that explained everything. And in a way, it did. Richard stood up and walked to the bookshelf where he had placed some photos recovered from the old house. He picked up a picture frame with the image of his first wife, Gabrielle. "I promised her I would always take care of our daughter," he said, his voice choked. "When Gabrielle fell ill in her last days, I made that vow. And then I completely failed." "You were deceived," Mrs. Cleo mused. "That woman was an expert at creating illusions. Everyone in the neighborhood thought she was an exemplary stepmother. At school parties, at social gatherings, always the perfect, dedicated mother. But you saw through the mask, because I was there every day. I saw the before and after of visits, of calls. I saw the girls' eyes silently pleading for help." Their conversation was interrupted by Richard's cell phone ringing. It was Detective Paul with news about the case. "Mr. Mendez, we have important information. We discovered offshore accounts in your wife's name and Mr. Miller's. Bahamas, Cayman, Switzerland. And what's more, this isn't the first time they've done this." "What do you mean?" "Roderick Miller has been investigated before for similar schemes. He approaches women in strategic positions, executive secretaries, wives of businessmen, financial managers, and develops relationships that facilitate access to resources. Denise appears to have been both an accomplice and a victim in this scheme." After hanging up, Richard remained silent for a few minutes, absorbing the new information. A persistent question hammered in his mind. How did he not notice the signs? How could he have been so blind? The answer came in fragments of memories, the controlled calls always on speakerphone, the plausible explanations for high expenses. Denise's insistence that he remain focused on work without worrying about domestic matters, the gradual reduction of contact between him and old friends who might question his wife's behavior. It was a calculated process, he concluded aloud. She systematically isolated me from everything and everyone who could open my eyes. And now your eyes are wide open, Mrs. Cleo observed. That's what matters for Julia. The next day, father and daughter visited the old house together for the first time since the airport events. The police had released the property after completing evidence collection. Richard planned to sell it as soon as possible. Neither he nor Julia wanted to maintain any ties to that place of painful memories. While Richard collected important documents in the office, Julia asked to revisit her old room. Alone, she looked at the peeling walls, the small window, the thin mattress on the makeshift wooden base. How had that space seemed so immense and frightening for so long? Kneeling, she checked the crack in the baseboard where she had hidden her last desperate note. The paper was still there, untouched. She carefully picked it up, rereading the words written with so much fear. "Daddy, she's taking me away. Help." Help that arrived just in time, thanks to the courage of an elderly woman who refused to remain silent in the face of injustice. On the way back to the apartment, Richard made an unexpected stop at an art supply store. "Choose whatever you want," he said to Julia, whose expression instantly lit up. "Sketchbooks, colored pencils, paints. We're going to turn that spare room into your personal studio." For the first time in years, Julia felt truly free to choose something she desired. She walked the aisles with wide eyes, touching brushes, experimenting with the texture of different papers, admiring the infinity of colors available. They left the store carrying bags full of supplies, much more than necessary. But Richard couldn't deny any timid request from his daughter. It was his way of beginning to compensate for years of deprivation. That night, while Julia experimented with her new watercolors, Richard received another call from Detective Paul. "Mr. Mendez, we found something you need to see. Can we meet tomorrow at the precinct? It's about your first wife." Richard's heart raced. "Gabrielle, what about her? I prefer to show you personally, but I can tell you that we found disturbing documents on Denise's computer. It seems the story we know may not be complete." After hanging up, Richard remained motionless, staring at the phone in his hand. What secrets did Denise still keep? What else could she have done beyond what they already knew? On the other side of the apartment, oblivious to her father's new worries, Julia painted her first watercolor in years, a large blue butterfly flying over a green field under an infinite sky. A symbol of transformation and freedom that was finally beginning to become a reality in her life. The next morning, the Riverton sky dawned clear, with that intense blue characteristic of the southern winter. Richard left Julia in Mrs. Cleo's care and headed to the federal police headquarters, where Detective Paul awaited him with a folder of documents on the table. "Good morning, Mr. Mendez," the detective greeted, indicating the chair in front of him. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Richard sat down, tense. The mention of Gabriel in the previous call had kept him uneasy all night. What kind of information could they have discovered about his first wife, who had passed away so many years ago? "What did you find?" he asked directly, dispensing with formalities. The detective opened the folder and took out some printed sheets. "These are emails recovered from Denise's personal computer, dated approximately 7 years ago, shortly before your first wife's passing." Richard took the papers with trembling hands. They were exchanges between Denise, who at the time worked as a nurse at Windmill Heights Hospital, and a colleague from the oncology department. The first messages seemed innocent, comments about patients and hospital routines. Then gradually Gabriel's name began to appear. "That writer in room 237 worsened today. Her husband is that handsome engineer from Global Petroleum Corp, always bringing her books. I heard they're well off. And further on, I managed to be assigned as Gabrielle Mendez's auxiliary nurse. The doctor changed her medication today. It seems the treatment isn't responding as expected." As he read on, Richard felt a knot forming in his stomach. The messages became increasingly disturbing. "I befriended her. She's so naive, tells me everything about their lives. The little daughter, the house, the properties they own, and she's so grateful for every little favor. Little does she know I'm eyeing the whole package, including the widower she'll leave behind. The last message in that set was the most explicit. I'm not accelerating anything. I'm just not trying my hardest. See the difference? No one can accuse me of anything. If she's destined to go, who am I to interfere with fate? And then I'll console the widower, help with the little daughter, make myself indispensable. It's a perfect plan. Richard let the papers fall onto the table, his face pale as wax. This means... Detective Paul sighed heavily. It means Denise met your first wife while she was hospitalized, Mr. Mendez, and apparently saw an opportunity there. We cannot state categorically that she directly caused or accelerated Ms. Gabrielle's passing, but there is evidence of deliberate negligence. My God, Richard whispered, feeling as if the ground disappeared beneath his feet. Gabrielle was responding well to treatment initially. The doctors were optimistic. Then suddenly, there was an inexplicable worsening. We are investigating the medical records and interviewing other professionals who worked at the hospital at the time, the detective explained. We already know that Denise was warned a few times for errors in medication administration, but nothing was ever formally recorded as serious negligence. Richard ran his hands over his face, trying to process that devastating revelation. It wasn't enough to know that Denise had mistreated his daughter and stolen his money. Now there was the terrible possibility that she had in some way contributed to Gabrielle's early loss. What happened after? Richard couldn't complete the sentence. After your wife passed away? The detective consulted his notes. Denise requested a transfer to another department of the hospital, but maintained contact with you through a support group for families of oncology patients, correct? Richard nodded slowly, recalling. She appeared at the funeral, offered help with Julia, who was only 5 at the time. She seemed so sincere, so dedicated. We started to grow closer a few months later. She said Gabrielle had deeply touched her life during the period she cared for her at the hospital. A calculated manipulation from the beginning, the detective concluded. The psychological profile we are building of Denise points to a classic case of a sociopathic personality with a high capacity for planning and execution. She likely identified your family as an ideal target. A husband frequently absent for work, a wife vulnerable due to illness, a young daughter, and substantial financial resources. Leaving the precinct, Richard felt as if he had aged decades in just 1 hour. The magnitude of the betrayal, the depth of Denise's plan, the idea that everything in his life in recent years had been built on lies, it was almost unbearable. He drove aimlessly through the streets of Riverton, eventually stopping at Windmill Heights Park. He walked to a bench near the lake and sat down, watching the swans glide peacefully across the water. It was there, on that same bench, that he had spoken with Gabrielle for the last time before her definitive hospitalization. "Promise me you'll move on," she had said, holding his hands with fingers already weakened by illness. "Promise me you'll be happy again for yourself and for Julia." And he had promised. He believed he was fulfilling that promise when he married Denise, when he tried to rebuild a family for his daughter. How could he have been so blind? His cell phone rang, bringing him back to the present. "It was Mrs. Cleo, Mr. Richard. Julia is asking for you. She finished a painting and really wants you to see it." "Tell her I'm on my way," he replied, getting up from the bench. Regardless of the pain he felt, his daughter was waiting for him. And after everything she had been through, Richard was determined never to disappoint her again. In the apartment, he found Julia in the small space they had transformed into a makeshift studio. She smiled shyly, positioned next to a canvas covered with a cloth. "Daddy, I made a surprise," she announced with a mixture of pride and nervousness. Mrs. Cleo helped me find an old photo. When she removed the cloth, Richard felt the air leave his lungs. On the canvas, painted with surprising talent for a 9-year-old, was a portrait of Gabrielle, based on the only photograph where mother and daughter appeared together in the hospital. Days before her passing. "It's so you don't forget how beautiful she was," Julia explained, carefully observing her father's reaction. "Mrs. Cleo said I have her smile." Richard knelt, reaching his daughter's height, and hugged her tightly. "It's the most precious gift I've ever received," he said, his voice choked. "And Mrs. Cleo is right. You have exactly her smile, and her talent too." At that moment, looking at the portrait painted with so much love, Richard made a decision. He would not tell Julia about the discoveries of that morning, at least not now, not while she was still recovering from so many traumas. Someday when she was older, when she was emotionally stronger perhaps. For now, he would allow her to keep only the good memories of her mother, without the burden of knowing that her loss might have been part of a macabre plan. In the following weeks, as the case against Denise and Roderick strengthened with new evidence, Richard and Julia established a routine that prioritized emotional recovery and the strengthening of family bonds. He drastically reduced his work trips, negotiating an administrative position with the company that required only occasional travel. Julia gradually returned to school, initially with private lessons at home and, after a month, attending morning classes at a new institution where no one knew her past or recent events. With the continuous support of the psychologist, she began to show significant progress. She smiled more frequently, made friends, rediscovered the joy in normal childhood activities. The legal process moved forward. Denise and Roderick remained in preventive detention, considered potential fugitives due to international connections and still unlocated financial resources. The investigation into possible negligence in Gabrielle's treatment, however, faced difficulties due to a lack of conclusive evidence and the passage of time. One Saturday afternoon, while painting another of her butterfly pictures, Julia asked a question that caught Richard by surprise. "Daddy, do you think I'll ever be able to forgive Aunt Denise?" Richard, who was reading a book by the window, looked up, thoughtful. "Why are you asking that, sweetheart?" The psychologist said holding on to anger hurts us, not the person who hurt us, Julia explained, carefully mixing shades of blue on her palette. "But I don't know if I can not feel angry after everything she did." Richard closed the book and approached his daughter. "Forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once, Julia. It's a process, and you don't have to force it or rush that process. But what if I can never forgive? Then we'll learn to live with that too," he replied sincerely. "The important thing isn't to forgive for the sake of forgiving, but not to let resentment define who you are or how you live your life. Understood?" Julia nodded slowly, absorbing those words. After a moment, she added, "I already forgave you, you know." Richard felt a lump in his throat. "You forgave me? For not seeing what was happening? For believing her and not me?" Silent tears streamed down Richard's face. It was a forgiveness he wasn't sure he deserved, but which he accepted as the precious gift it was. "Thank you," he whispered, kissing the top of his daughter's head. "I promise I will never fail you again." That night, after Julia fell asleep, Richard received a call from Detective Paul. They had located another offshore account, this time in Singapore, containing approximately $800,000. It was the last fragment of the financial puzzle, completing the total amount embezzled over the years. "With this, we have practically concluded the financial part of the investigation," the detective informed. "The next step will be the trial, likely in the coming months." "And what about the other matter?" Richard asked hesitantly. The detective sighed on the other end of the line. "Unfortunately, Mr. Mendes, we couldn't find conclusive evidence about her conduct during your first wife's treatment. There are indications of negligence, but nothing that can sustain a formal accusation after so much time. The hospital underwent administrative changes, records were lost or are incomplete." Richard thanked him for the information and hung up. In a way, perhaps it was for the best. There were already too many truths to process, too many pains to heal. Some questions might never have complete answers, and he needed to learn to live with that reality. 3 months later, on a sunny spring morning, Richard and Julia visited the cemetery where Gabrielle was buried. It was the first time they had gone together since the recent events. They brought fresh flowers and a small painting by Julia, a serene landscape representing the sunset over Lake Willow, her mother's favorite place in Riverton. "Do you think she would be proud of me?" Julia asked, as she arranged the flowers on the grave. "I'm absolutely certain," Richard replied. "Your mother always said you had a special inner strength, even when you were just a baby." She was right. On the way back, they passed the old house in Windmill Heights, now with a sold sign in the front yard. Richard had accepted an offer below market value, eager to definitively cut ties with that place. "Who bought it?" Julia asked, observing the property from the car window. A young family with 5-year-old twins, Richard replied. I hope they're happy there. Me too, Julia said, surprising her father. The house isn't to blame for what happened inside it. Richard smiled, admiring the unexpected wisdom in his daughter's observation. Indeed, the walls of that house had witnessed both the sincere love of the early years and the manipulation and suffering that came later. Now they would have the chance to shelter new stories, new beginnings. Upon arriving at the apartment, they found Mrs. Cleo preparing a special lunch. On the living room table, an official envelope caught Richard's attention. It arrived in the mail this morning, the old lady explained. It looks important. It was a court notification. The trial date for Denise and Roderick had been set for 45 days from now. Along with the notification, a statement informing that Julia would need to testify, but could do so via video conference, without the need for direct confrontation with the accused. Is everything all right? Mrs. Cleo asked, noticing Richard's worried expression. Yes, he replied, putting the documents away. Just one more step to definitively close this chapter. During lunch, they talked about plans for the future. Richard mentioned the possibility of a trip during the next school holidays, perhaps to the Caribbean, for Julia to experience the warm water beaches she dreamed of visiting. Mrs. Cleo spoke about her husband Gerald, who was responding well to the new treatment, partly financed by Richard, as a token of gratitude for everything she had done. And you, Julia? Any special plans? Mrs. Cleo asked. The girl thought for a moment, playing with her cutlery. I want to write a book, she finally announced. Like Mommy did. A book about a girl who faces difficult times but finds good people who help her. Richard and Mrs. Cleo exchanged emotional glances. The idea of Julia transforming her painful experience into art, following in Gabrielle's footsteps, seemed like the perfect closure for that cycle. I think that's a wonderful idea, Richard said. Your mother always said that writing was a way to transform pain into beauty. Then I'll start today, Julia decided, with an enthusiasm that lit up the entire room. That afternoon, sitting in her small studio, Julia opened a new notebook, no longer a secret diary of sufferings, but a space for creation and healing. On the first page, she wrote a provisional title, The Butterfly Girl. And so, as the Riverton sun began its slow descent over Lake Willow, painting the sky with orange hues that would soon inspire another canvas, a new story began to be written, a story of new beginnings, of wounds that slowly heal, of family ties rebuilt on stronger foundations of love and truth. A story that, as real life often insists on being, did not offer perfectly happy endings, but the sincere promise of better days, built with the courage of those who learned, even so young, that the greatest strength lies not in never falling, but in always finding reasons to get back up. Dear listeners, we hope Julia and Richard's journey has touched your hearts as much as it has touched ours. To continue experiencing emotions like this, we have a special playlist with other incredible stories of overcoming and family rebirth. Find it by clicking here on the side. If this narrative about masks falling and truth setting free has awakened something in you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the transformative power of true love. Leave a comment if you have ever lived or witnessed situations where appearances were deceiving, and how the truth eventually found its way. Your experience can inspire and strengthen other people going through similar moments. Until the next story.